We'll tell you why FanDuel's projection of 7.5 wins for Ole Miss is easy money, but we'll also tell you why FanDuel set it there to begin with. This is the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. Hi, I'm Stephen Willis. This is the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, and FanDuel has put out its projections for win total throughout the SEC. Here you go in this fancy Dan graphic that I got from Locked On. It has Ole Miss at 7.5 wins. Now, that is good enough for fifth best in the Southeastern Conference. And the reality is, just looking at this graphic, and my first impression is there's really only one elite team in the SEC. They do play a game away at Tennessee. That is Georgia. They have Ole Miss as a home game. But what are the odds that one of those are going to get the win? That's going to determine the over-under. I think Alabama has a chance to be a little bit overrated, especially early in the season. They have a pretty tough September. LSU, I just don't know if it was a fluke or if it's real or what's going to happen. I know Brian Kelly's a really good coach. In Tennessee, I just don't know if they can get that high again. So what you have is you're going to potentially have one team that has an absurd over-under number, and then you have 10 teams that are within a game of two or of each other. So it should be pretty interesting. But what I want to talk about is the 7.5 wins for Ole Miss. And I understand why they made the choices they made. I get it entirely. It just is what it is. Whenever you look at the flaws that this Ole Miss team potentially has, it makes sense to do that. This team, talent-wise, has no business doing that. And if they hit 7 wins, if they hit the under at all in this, the season was an unmitigated disaster for Lane Kiffin. Now, I realize that Ole Miss has a difficult schedule this year. At Georgia and at Alabama. They play LSU at home. 3 of the teams ranked ahead of them on that over-under chart is on the schedule this year. But I think that 7.5, we'll start with why that number got picked. Is the strength of schedule going to Georgia and to Alabama. That's just 2 L's you put on the board. And you play another team that's ahead of you on that chart. So that's 3 losses. So in their mind, Vegas's mind, you're at 9-3 before you start. Now you have to lose another game and a half. Now, traditionally that would probably be possible, and they're going off of what Ole Miss did last season. They're going off the fact that there's a clear hole in the middle of the field, and I'm going to harp on this forever. Until the first game, I'm going to harp on this. And the offense being not as effective as it could be. They're going by what Chris Marshall just went through and what that does to the offense. All of those things to go with a new defense is the reason FanDuel put them at 7.5 or 7.5. Now, this is what I'm going to tell you why this could be an easy bet. Now, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But talent-wise, this is one of the most talented teams in Ole Miss football history. Yeah, I said that. Now, will they be able to do it? That's another question. That's not what I'm talking about. But just straight talent, this team is exactly where it needs to be. You're losing a Zach Evans off this team, and you're replacing him with a top 100 player behind him. I mean, it might be a little bit less talent-wise at the running back position, but not much. Quarterback room undoubtedly improved. Nobody can dispute that. Wide receiver room, we will see. If Ole Miss can rein in and get Keon Coleman, this wide receiver room this year is better than the one they had last year. Period. The tight end room this year, better than last year. Offensive line, at least even. So offensively, they're in better shape than they were a year ago. There's not anyone going to be able to dispute that. Defensively, we have questions because of the fit of the certain players on the defensive side of the ball. We're going to talk in the next segment how one of the defensive players is one of the most impactful predicted transfers in college football. Yeah, you don't hear people talking about stuff like that. It's not that they're not talking about it. It's just they're concentrating on the flaws too much. And I've gone this season. Every day this week, we've done question marks on that defensive side of the ball. But I'm not going to harp on it because I do know that those players can play. And being a preseason fifth in the SEC and over-under is a good place to be. And that is a sign of respect from Vegas considering how hard the schedule is this year and the known flaws that Ole Miss has. But I contend that if Jaxson Dart solves the middle of the field, and if he doesn't, if they put another quarterback in that will use the middle of the field, and they use that as a strength, Quinshon Judkins, Michael Trigg, Caden Priestcorn, that becomes the focal point of your offense, this team has a chance to go on a run. It's becoming the point where if they decide they want to do that, then all of a sudden you have Keon Coleman on the outside. You have Trey Harris on the outside. You have a couple of jackrabbits in Dayton Wade and Jordan Watkins. And all of a sudden, that dog will hunt. Defensively on the defensive line, this team is at least as good as last year, maybe better. Linebackers, a couple of transfers that you're counting on. Those questions haven't been answered one way or another. And if anybody tells you linebacker's a problem, they don't know. Cornerback, you do have starting piece. You're looking for depth pieces. And whenever you get somebody like Dejon Anthony, you have one. He's played some corner at the Division I level. Safety position, that's the one that I have my eyes. You saw the show yesterday. My everydayers can attest to it. That is the position with my eye on it. And if you look at special teams, like Caden Costa, I'm completely fine with that. Frazier Mason has to improve. I don't know. Until there's live action, we will not see exactly what it looks like. And in the return game, Ole Miss has some athletes. They're going to be fine in the return game. That is my post-spring special teams breakdown. But if Ole Miss is able to use this offense and formulate a way to run it effectively, they will easily hit the over number in that 7.5 number. Won't even be close. They have a better chance at that point at 9 wins than they do at 7. I think 8 is the floor if the offense does what it's supposed to do. If the offense sputters along with the newness of the defense, then you're getting into that. This is where bad things can happen. And we've seen by the baseball team, just because you're super talented, you're not entitled to win everything all the time. Hiccups can happen. Yo-yos can happen. So we'll see. In my head, in my mind, I think the floor of this team, this Ole Miss football team, should be 9 wins. And that gives you losing to Georgia, Alabama, and then one other game. That gives you that. I think 9 wins should be the floor. But if it goes wrong, terrible things happen, I can see how that number could be a little bit lower and how they could entice bets one way or another. And that's probably why that number is as low as it is. Anyway, today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious snack but don't want all these sugars and calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever. Built, you got to try this. If you're like me and you want to make a healthier snack choice but you don't want to compromise taste, I've got just the thing for you. It's Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are healthy and taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so amazing. You won't even think they're good for you. You have got to try this. What makes them so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real dark chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. They come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. I'm not sure how they do it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein, and now you don't need to wait to get boxed. For years, we've been talking about ordering Built Bars at Built.com. But now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club, while you can still get your specialty flavors at Built.com. So that's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, a double chocolate, or maybe even coconut puffs. If you're close to a Sam Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, Brownie Batter Puff and Churro Puff. You can thank me later. Really, really great stuff. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow on the show, Brian Smith makes his debut as the Locked On recruiting guy, and we'll have him his show, I think it's 7 a.m. Saturday it goes live. We talked to him about Damon Williams, Kamarion Franklin, and Jamonte Waller. Pretty good stuff from Brian as well. Now, changing gears just a little bit, but not really, because a lot of this has to do with my point in the first segment. And that is 247 put out their list of 50 most impactful transfers shaping the 2023 season. You can see here, Brad Crawford put it out there. This is based off production projections and overall expected impact this fall. Here's a group of transfers who will be difference makers at their program. One Ole Miss player made the list, and that was Monty Montgomery. The write-up says, did Kiffin and the Rebels snag the most underrated defensive transfer? Perhaps. Montgomery led Louisville last season with 11 tackles for loss and 6 sacks from his post at linebacker and brings much needed physicality to the Ole Miss defense. He forced 4 fumbles, posted 2 interceptions as well. Montgomery is a complete player despite being undersized and could make a name for himself as a future NFL draft pick in the SEC. Ole Miss finding him and landing his commitment is vital towards this defense's 2023 revamp. And that is absolutely the case. He's a madly important cog. I've told you about this for months. If you're an everydayer, you know how high I've been on Monty Montgomery. And people are going to talk about the spring game and the spring break. No, that's 15 practices. We're fine at this point. They're still trying to get everything in there. And what you've seen is not the best or what you're even going to see come the beginning of September. I fully expect Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste and Monty Montgomery to be patrolling the middle of the field. I think you'll see a Suntarine Perkins potentially as well. I think this defense has a chance to look more and more like a 3-3 at times, as opposed to a 4-2. And that is, I genuinely, if you watch yesterday's show, we did talk about the prospect of Suntarine at Jag, which is the hybrid defensive end and linebacker position. I know it could be weird for a 215-pound backer to be playing defensive end and stuff like that, but I am of the thought process, if you can get him on the move, if you can get Monty Montgomery on the move to where the defense can't really know exactly how they need to handle them, they could cause problems for an offensive unit. Now, you can almost bet that it's going to have to be situational. I'm not saying it's not going to be a situational type event. But if it is, and they get going good, and you can't just do to Ole Miss's defense what you did last year. And remember, last year, I attribute completely to schematics. If you look at Texas A&M to Arkansas, all teams that ran that defense had the same problem. That wasn't a problem with defensive linemen at Ole Miss. That wasn't a problem with anything going on. That was a scheme hole that got figured out, and people just started attacking it. That is what happened there. So we'll see exactly what J.J. Pegues can bring to the table. We'll see Joshua Harris, Jared Ivey, Cedric Johnson. That core on the defensive line are going to be strong. So with somebody like Monty Montgomery, if they're taking up blockers, his athleticism and undersized ability and his ability to attack will be a very big cog in this defense. I'm telling you, him and Suntarine Perkins has a chance to really be a dynamic duo on this defense this year with somebody like a plugger like Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste in the middle. Remember, there's questions on this defense at all three levels. There just are. But that doesn't mean this defense can't be good at things. That doesn't mean these questions can't be answered. And these are potential answers that I'm posing to questions that we have on this defense. Will they accept them? Will they use them? I don't know. But they're just ideas that I had and thought that I needed to talk about. And I'm looking forward to what Monty Montgomery brings to this defense, honestly. He's a really good, really athletic player. I talk about all the time until he got his targeting penalty in 2021 against us in the Georgia Dome. Monty Montgomery was a problem. He just was. He was all over the field. He was the name that I recognized from somebody not really paying attention to names of the Louisville defense in that game. Kept popping up. It's something that I expect here. Playmakers and people with noses for the football generally figure it out, and that trait continues the next stop. So I expect Monty Montgomery to be a really, really big player. And like I said, I expect Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste as well. And then you have the Jack and you have the Husky, and it's going to be interesting to see exactly how Ole Miss handles that. You might have a situation to where they go undersized at Jack and Husky, and they just alternate like Tennyson and Suntarine Perkins, just so the defense can't identify the strength of the defense. Could be very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to it personally. I'm looking forward to seeing exactly what they can do. Anyway, coming up after this break, we're going to have Chris Childers, if technology permits, from Sirius XM's Full Ride. So we're partners with Sirius XM. Chris is a big friend of the show. This will be his third or fourth appearance on the show since its beginning. So we'll have Chris Childers talking about the SEC as a whole. So stick around. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including Sirius XM. Search Ole Miss Football and the show will appear on there. I'm here with one of the hosts of the Full Ride that you can catch on College Sports Nation on Sirius XM. Chris Childers. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing good, Steve. It's good to see you, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. I saw on Twitter a while back your big England vacation, going over there seeing soccer games and stuff like that. Good for you, man.
It's a lot of fun. I suggest any SEC fan get their butt over there and compare and contrast to a big Premier League game, because I'm telling you, there's not that many differences, man. The passion runs deep.
Yeah, it looks really cool, and it looked like on your Twitter timeline you were having a really good time as well. But I don't want to hold you too long. Let's kind of get right into this. The FanDuel Sportsbook released their over-unders, so to speak. And what stands out from this chart to you?
Georgia's 11.5. So that you have to bet, Steve, you have to bet for them to go undefeated to win your bet. Mm-hmm. That's kind of, and honestly, I would take the bet probably. I don't see any reason to believe, like, you look at the schedule, who's going to beat Georgia? The schedule is so light. Their non-conference is ridiculous. They play like UAB and Georgia Tech is obviously the rivalry at the end, which is, supposedly their hard game, but their non-conference is cake. Really, the only team I look at in the division that has any chance at all to contend with them, I mean, even looking at this chart here, is Tennessee. But Tennessee's over-under is 9.5. So how good are they going to be, right? I mean, outside of that, look at this. Kentucky 6.5 wins. Georgia walks its way to an SEC East championship again. The question is, will they do it undefeated? But 11.5 wins, that means they have to go 12-0 for you to win your bet. And I, quite frankly, wouldn't bet against it. The other thing that pops out is Florida at 5.5 wins. If that's true, there's like 5,000 people on the staff. What are they paying for? What are they equipping Billy Napier for to be worse than Dan Mullen? That stands out to me at 5.5. And if you start to break it down, you start to wonder where the wins are going to come from.
Yeah, I look at this chart, and the thing that jumps out to me is maybe the biggest lock on the whole chart is going over on Vanderbilt in 3.5.
I think you're right. Vanderbilt, 3.5 wins. Where do they come from? I mean, I know they had a better season a year ago. I don't know where they're going to come from. South Carolina, I would go over 6.5 on South Carolina. I think they proved something to us a year ago. Auburn, I think, stands out to me at 6.5. I don't think there's any way Hugh Freeze lets them go behind 8. Go less than 8. I just think Hugh is like Brian Kelly. They're not going to suck. They're going to be better. The presence alone makes them better. He's a better football coach. He's going to invigorate them. I think they're going to be 8-4. And then A&M at 7-5. If that holds, if they're around 7-8 wins, what the hell are they paying for? What are they paying for?
You're absolutely correct there. I mean, absolutely nuts. And this is one little hot take that I have that I don't know if it's a hot take, but I kind of am willing to go there at this point in the season. And that is, if Alabama loses to Texas, they're going to be an 8-win team.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. I think a lot of people are just accepting Alabama as a 10-win team just because they're Alabama. But really, based on what? And you look at the quarterback position, I think you're right, Steve. I wouldn't be shocked if they're 8-4. Because what about them tells us they're 10-2 or 11-1 or 12-0? Just the A, right? Just that's it. Or, I mean, that's the only thing about it that says they're going to be better. But I think the SEC West is better. I think LSU, quite frankly, is a better team than them right now. I think they're the favorite. They're not maybe deep, but I think their front line and their quarterback, I think Daniels is a Heisman Trophy finalist by the end of the year. If Tyler Buchner is your best option, and I'm a Notre Dame guy, you're screwed. Tyler Buchner's not very good. Tyler Buchner is an average college quarterback. If you're looking to average, when you just had a generational player at quarterback, I mean, Bryce Young to me is a freak show. So if you're going from that to this, plus you're losing Will Anderson on the other side, I don't see Bama doing what they used to do. I'm not looking at the great reload right now. I think there might be a little bit of rebuild. And if that's the case, that's a problem with LSU. That's a problem with Hugh Freeze. The division got a lot tougher over the last couple of years because you have competent coaching in the division now.
Yeah, in Alabama, everybody talks about it's like, hey, they were 2 plays away from being undefeated. Well, they were also 2 plays away from being in the Music City Bowl last year.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, because the ball was in the air against A&M, and on the last play of the game, it was in the air against Ole Miss. Both of those could have easily gone the other direction. So it'll be interesting. I'm not one of these people that wants to talk about the decline, but I do think the talent being gotten in Georgia is affecting the same players that they normally recruit to Alabama. And if you bring that talent line down just a little bit, all of a sudden there's not as much of a gap between Ole Miss, LSU, Tennessee, and it becomes honestly a gettable game. Honestly, I think that's why Nick Saban is going to the offense that he's going to this year. They're going to play field position. They're going to run the football. They're going to play time of possessions, old school like Nick Saban ran at Alabama with A.J. McCarron. And they're going to do that because, honestly, they have to. They can't be so freewheeling anymore.
I think you're 100% right. And you know what's weird to me, Steve, is that Nick Saban adjusted who he was over time. He adapted with the times. He went to RPOs. But don't you think Kirby has proven to us that Nick never had to? Yeah. Never had to do that. He could have been himself the whole time and never got himself in this position where he's sort of in offensive no man's land.
No, that's absolutely the case. Georgia has absolutely proven that 2012 Alabama could win in 2023.
Yeah, 100%. So you wonder if there's a little bit of doubt there from Nick Saban because he was the best at building up the great defensive team, stockpile the defensive linemen, have a great running back, be okay at quarterback, but you didn't have to be great. I mean, Tyler Buckner would have been a fine quarterback back in 2011 for Alabama, but they're not built that way now.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy. And I don't want to keep you too long today, so let's change the subject just a little bit. What is your SEC team to watch?
You know, it's an interesting question. I'm not really in love with anybody in this league outside of maybe Georgia and LSU right now. But as far as the bottom ranks, I'm really curious to see what South Carolina is going to be. A year ago, they whipped Tennessee. They beat Clemson. Nobody thought that Shane Beamer would have them in this position. Was it real? Or was it just something that they're going to go back and be a 6-win team? I think if they're an 8-9 win team, then they're on to something. I think he might be better than advertised. And I think that's the team I'm really kind of paying attention to. As far as teams to watch, nobody's going to beat Georgia. And watch the SEC West. Watch it, see if A&M, if that Petrino and Jimbo thing works out. I have a weird feeling it's going to get weird. But pay attention to that, because I think the way those guys commingle is going to be very, very interesting.
Exactly. Now, the other side of the coin, what's the team from the bottom of the league that you're looking to surprise?
Well, Vanderbilt a year ago won 5 games. They're a team that I like their quarterback. I like some of their bones. Getting to 6 wins would be a surprise. So I think that's a team that we're kind of looking at right now. I think Florida's a team, if they can get to 7-8 wins with Graham Mertz, a quarterback, then Billy Napier knows what he's doing. If they don't, then it's Graham Mertz playing quarterback, and the guy is wasting his time and, quite frankly, wasted a year with that kid at quarterback. I don't really love them. I don't love the Florida Gators, but I think if they can get to 8, then they'll be on to something. Anything less, it's going to get weird again.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, tell people how they can catch a show every day.
Yeah, Full Ride you can listen to on Sirius XM on College Sports Radio Channel 84. We start every morning at 8 a.m. Central Time, and we get off at 11. So right before lunchtime, we'll lead you into that, and then there's some great programming the rest of the day. So check it out on 84.
Yeah, favorite it on the Sirius XM app, and also search Ole Miss Football and Locked On Ole Miss and favorite that one as well. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Every day is tomorrow on the show, Ole Miss recruiting, Brian Smith. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Anyway, thank you so much, Chris, and I hope everything's going well. And if you ever need anything, let me know.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you.
All right, bud.